Within this lesson, we're going to look at another way to hold multiple values within our variable names.
This video is brought to you by EpiPies Academy.
So previously we had looked at arrays and we saw how nice and neatly we could output content from the array, and we saw that we can use the index values to pull those items and the information contained within those items back out and make it usable within our source code. So we can do the same for objects. Now the difference between arrays and objects is that objects use what's considered paired values, where they have a name and a value attached to it. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to create one called my object, and objects have curly brackets. So different than arrays, they've got these curly brackets. And within objects, we can do things where we can specify. So if I've got a course, so the name value for this particular item in the object is going to be course, and then we need to assign a value to it. So notice that the values get assigned. So we do the colon and we separate it out with the colon, and then we use the same format as we do with arrays and with other variables, where if we've got a string value, we need to quote around there. And with objects, we're able to actually hold multiple values. So if we had a course and if we had a price there for the course, we could do something like 200, and if we had more information, so maybe we have title. So we can do the same thing as we did with the arrays, where we can actually utilize all of the different types of variables, such as we did before. We've got numbers, strings, and booleans, and we can use them within our object values. Now, the same thing with arrays, we can actually pull out values of objects, and within the console it comes out nice and neatly. So I'll just show you what it's going to look like within the console, and this will actually give us a hint on how we can actually output those values out into our script and make it actually usable. Now with objects, there's two different ways to output that content. The first way we can do it with we've done it where we've got the entire object, but what if we want to just specify the course? So we can do it in a similar fashion as we did with JavaScript, where we could do something like this, and we could bracket it, do the course, and then this is the same thing as we did where we specified the index value, and then that referenced and returned back the actual contained value. So we use the property name, and then that name returns back the value. So we can do it that way. And another way, and probably a more often used way of doing it, is just using a decimal. So just the period there, and that will return back those values as well. Now there is reasoning for why we've got two different options here for the object properties. And for the object properties themselves, we actually have the ability to increment this. So if we were doing something where we had multiple courses, so we had course 1, we had course 2, and we actually want to reference both of those values here within course, we can't actually do that. We could have course 1, we could have course 2, but we can't have changing dynamic value that would contain that value that we wanted to use. So if I had something like A, and we'll give A a number of 1, so over here we've got the my object course, and we can actually add to that. So we can concatenate a value of A to it, and that will actually output that value as we've specified. So we see that course is 1, and I'm going to make them different so we can actually see there is a difference. So we'll see that we got ability to do a dynamic output of those values. And this is really powerful stuff, because with JavaScript it's all about making these dynamic values. So now that I've incremented A, so I'm using that mathematical arithmetic way of incrementing the value of a. So a is no longer going to be 1 after this point. A is going to have a value of 2. And notice how we've named our items here within our object. Our property name is JavaScript 1, JavaScript 2, and now we're dynamically calling those values using variables. So we're incrementing a, and we're getting back a value of a. So a is now going to be 2. So do you think that we're actually going to output JavaScript 2 in the next line? And if you said yes, you're correct, because now this is a dynamic value. And remember again that previously when we looked at when we have a numeric value and we're adding it to a string value, what do we end up with? A string value. And the value of the string is just that quoted value here. So this is the same thing as having a quoted value of course 2. And this is the same thing of having a quoted value of course 1. And this is the beginning of creating dynamic content within JavaScript, because the idea is that you use your values within your contained variables, and then you update them and manipulate them within your code, creating different outputs. And we can constantly use different variables and values here, and we could even have a course 3 and a different value for it, and we can keep incrementing it. And doing all of this is really powerful and provides us with a lot of opportunities within our JavaScript code. So in the next lesson, we're going to look at functions. And functions are another integral part of programming, and they provide a powerful way to run snippets and output content from these snippets of code right within your application. So that's coming up in the next lesson.